Hello everybody, Bob the Chemist here, and I want to show a quick video on how we import data from a data acquisition system such as a LabQuest 2 into Excel and use that to create some plots that are suitable for a laboratory report. This LabQuest 2 is what I use in my laboratories. It's from Vernier Technology, and it's got a variety of sensors with it. If you're in my class, you know what we're talking about. It has a couple slots here for analog sensors, such as a pH electrode. Allows you to essentially turn this into a pH meter. And what we end up doing is collecting titration curves that look something like this, where you have a standard titration curve, the pH versus volume, and then we also calculate what's called the first derivative. Helps us identify the equivalence point a little bit more precisely. And the idea is once we've collected this data and exported it as a text file, we need to import it into Excel and figure out how to plot and format it properly. So let's assume that we already have that exported file somewhere on our computer, and we're going to start by going into Excel here and select Open. When we select Open, we're going to go into Browse and make sure, this is the first thing, usually it's going to be selected as Excel files down here, so the file type needs to be text files in order for us to find the appropriate file, and that's sodium hydroxide sample text is what I've got, so I'm going to open that up, and when that happens, what we're going to see is the text import wizard. This is useful for figuring out the appropriate spacing of the data. Everything by default here should be fine so long as you've hit delimited, and you can actually hit finished and it will show up properly. And let's see here, we'll just bring this up like so. There we go. And so we've got our set of data. Now, one of the first things that you've probably noticed with the Vernier data acquisition system is that if you've selected multiple runs or if you've recorded multiple runs, all of those runs are actually stored right here. This is a set of maybe 4 or 5 or 6 different experiments all collected together. So really the first thing that needs to happen is you take the data that you want and put it onto a new tab. So I'm going to go down to run number 2. And scrolling down, I'm just looking for this little header part to indicate that it is a new run. And I will select that until we get down to the end of this. And there we are. Sure enough, we will copy that, Control C, and open up a new sheet and press Control V. There we go. So once we are in this category or in this situation, we can delete a couple columns. The top 3 rows rather are not needed, so I'm going to get rid of those. And I only need volume and the first row there for titles, so we'll get rid of everything else. And now I've got a set of data with 3 columns. First column is going to be the X data, the volume. Next is the pH, and the next is the first derivative. Go ahead and highlight all 3 of those and insert a chart that has either smooth lines or it could be the straight lines. It doesn't matter at this point. It has an effect on performance. If you have a whole bunch of data points, it doesn't matter in our particular case. Do not choose dots in this particular one. Okay, we've got our plot. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. And you see that we've got 2 traces. One is the pH and one is the first derivative. The next thing that we're going to do here is format this chart so that it is actually suitable for a formal laboratory report. Microsoft does a terrible job at choosing defaults, so there's not a single default template that is going to get you even close to what we need to do. So unfortunately, we have to do a lot of modifications to this, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So if you stick around, you'll see how we can simplify this process for the second and subsequent plots. First thing we do, we get rid of that title, and we're going to add axes titles. We're going to get rid of grid lines. Everything else we need to do through the 3 additional options. First thing, Notice how getting rid of grid lines got rid of any tick marks. So let's go ahead and right-click on an axis, select Format Axis. Over here, we will, there we are. One more time, right-click. Oh, there we are. And we're going to choose from the graph icon there, tick marks. Doesn't matter which ones you choose. I personally like crosses for major and inside for minor. That really is a preference, just as long as you have some. It is important that we change the line to black. Gray is not an accessible color and it doesn't print very well. So do the same thing for the y-axis. First left click, then right click, choose Format Axis. Here we are. Choose cross. Whatever you chose for the other one, make sure you choose here the same for consistency, and make sure that the colors are black. Great. Notice how that only changed the color of the tick marks, not the color of the font. So we actually now need to go through, and it's easiest if we just go home and choose the color of the font. And we will need to do this for anything that has a font that is not black. And same thing for the legend. There we are. Good. Last thing we need to do here, the colors of the two traces need to be changed. We're going to change the pH curve to black. We're actually going to change both of these colors to black. I'm just selecting on these and then choose black. Obviously, we need to now differentiate between the two black lines. So for the first derivative plot, I will change the dash type to, again, here it's whatever your preference is. Sometimes, depending on the number of points in the trace, some will look better than others, but as long as we can differentiate between the two, we are fine. Last, let's go ahead and put in axes titles here. This one is pH. Now, technically, it is only pH for this one right here. The units of the first derivative are going to be a little bit different. We don't care about that for this particular this particular plot. And I'm going to call this volume. Since I know what the units are, I'm going to put those in parentheses. Last thing I am going to do, since pH D1 is not a terribly useful descriptor, I'm going to go back up to the top here and just call this first derivative. Oops, spelled it wrong. There, first derivative. There we are. Okay, oops. We now have our chart. Probably the last thing that we might want to do in chart options, there should be no line around the border. So when we copy paste this into a Word document, we don't get that silly little line. It loses a line here, which is why I do that at the very, very end, so it's easy to see. Okay, so there's a completely properly formatted plot that you can cut and paste into your Word document. The last thing I want to show is if we select it and then right-click and choose Save as Template. And you go ahead and save this template. I'm going to call it Chem 313B because my course is called Chemistry 313, and I've already done a sample one just to make sure that this worked before running the video. So I go in here and I select Save. Now on my computer, I've got this template. So if I were to go and say, I want to do the same thing with this plot here. My lab reports only require one figure, but maybe your lab reports require additional ones. So I'm going to go in and copy the data that I need. If I go and insert my plot, it seems like I'm going to have to go and do the exact same thing over and over again. That seems to be wasting time, and I don't like to waste time. So once I'm here, I'm going to right-click and change the chart type. And when I go to change the chart type, you'll see one of the options up here is templates, and those are the two templates that I just made. click on B, click OK, bam, everything is the same as what I just did in the previous one. It looks like maybe there's some issues here with sizes. It might just be the zoom that I've chosen. So you might need to tweak something there, but a majority of this is fixed. Notice one thing that isn't fixed is the axis origin. Axis origin is 0, 0. Sometimes, depending on the nature of your plot, you're going to see that the origin needs to be in a slightly different location, as it does in this particular case, where we can fix that easily by just right-clicking, selecting Format Axis, and instead of having the horizontal axis at an automatic crossing, we're going to set that to whatever this bottom value is. In our case, it's -2. I do that and press enter, and it fixes that. So with fairly minimal, I'd need to go ahead and change the titles again and change this first derivative, but it saves me an awful lot of time and allows me to be consistent in all of my lab reports. So there you go, an easy way, hopefully an easy way for you to be formatting your laboratory data for your laboratory reports.